So I'm glad it worked. All right. Well, look at us. Look at what a little announcement does. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. We are going to begin with Minha, which I brought myself up and honestly marked.
214.
214. Yes, there. Okay, Alan will lead us on page 214, the Lev Shalem. You can use them.
226. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Yalucha Salam Tila LeDavid. Tila Nayada Bepi Vivarecha Basashen Kochelelam Vaed Vanatrach Ya Me'atav Yad Olam Hallelujah Uvalet Zion Goel. Be'ata kadosh shefti lo Yisrael v'korazel zev ha'abahar kadosh kadosh Adonai tzvot melech ha'aretz kevodo. V'tisa eni ruach v'shmacha korash gadol kavod Adonai mimikomo. Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. Titenem le'Yaakov chesed l'Avraham asher nishbata l'avotenu mi'imei kedem. V'yivtechu v'chayadei shemecha ki lo azavta roshech Adonai Adonai chafetz l'man tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir Yitkada v'yitkada Shemei Rabba Ve'almad yivakirutei ve'amlich v'achrutei b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayedecho be'Yisrael Pagalav izman kaviv imu amen V'yitbarach le'olam ve'almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbarach v'yitbarach v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalosh v'yitkedusha b'yichu le'elam min kol b'chata v'shirata tushbata v'nachem ha'daran be'alma v'imu amen Vani dvilati l'Adonai et ratzon Elohim b'rov chastecha Neni b'emed yishecha Vayehi bin Zaron Vayomer Moshe Kumar Adonai v'yafut zo'evecha V'yanusim esanecha mipanecha Ki mitzion tetzei Torah Udvar Adonai mirushalayim Baruch Shnatan Torah Lemo Yisrael b'kedushato. Gadlu Adonai tiru ma'ashemo yachdav.
Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. This side. Thank you. if we have one. That one right out there. Or Alan has one on, you can borrow his. Oh, there you go. Jordan. ותיגל לוותר מלכותו למזון קרוב ויחום ותתן פלטת עמו בישראל לחנך חסר רחמים רצון ונאמר אמן. הכבוד ותהיו כבוד לתורה. AJ, you want an aliyah? תעמוד. עמיתי יעל. ולרם משה לליה ראשון ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. Let's give you this if you want. Oh, sorry. We are at the beginning of Parashat Vayechi, page 293. Sorry, I have a different siddur in front of me. Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
אמן. ויחי יעקב בארץ מצרים 17 שנה, ויהי מיעקב שני חייו 7 שנים ו40 שנה, ויקרבו ימי ישראל למות, ויקרא לבנו ליוסף. ויאמר לו, אם נא מצאתי חן בעיניך, שים ידך תחת ירכי, ועשית עמדי חסד ואמת, אנא תקברני במצרים. ושכבתי עם אבותיי ונשאתני ממצרים וקברתני בקבורתם. ויאמר אנוכי אעשה כדבריך, ויאמר הישבע לי וישבע לו, וישתחו ישראל על ראש המיטה.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'Chaye Olam Natan B'Tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Chaim, would you like an aliyah? Ya'amod Harav Chaim Aryeh
Ben Shmuel Shalom v'Zahara.
Ben Shmuel Shalom v'Zahara Leliyah Sheni. You can come on this side, Chaim.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayahi acharei hadvarim ha'ela vayomer leYosef hine avicha cholech vayikach et shnei vanav imo et Menashe ve'et Ephraim vayaged leYaakov vayomer hine bincha Yosef ba elecha vayitchazek Yisrael vayeshev al hamita vayomer Yaakov el Yosef al
El
Shaddai nira Eli betluz be'eretz Canaan vayvarech
Oti. Yasher koach, Eric.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'Chaye Olam Nata B'Tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Not to embarrass him, but this was Eric's first time reading after his bar mitzvah. So mazal tov, and we'll sign you up many more times. Robert, would you like an aliyah? And I believe he worked with Robert, right? Oh, there you go. Student and teacher up for the Torah. Ya'amad Hechazan Reuven Benyamin Ben Chaim Feivel Umat Lachaya Laliah Shlishit
Baruch hu et Adonai hamborach. Baruch Adonai borach leolam vahed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol hamim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. ויאמר אלי, הנני מפרך וביתיך ונתתיך לקהל עמים, ונתתי את הארץ הזאת לזרעך אחריך אחוזת עולם, ואתה שני בניך הנותנים לך בארץ מצרים, עד בואי אליך מצרימה לי הם אפרים ומנשה, כראובן ושמעון יהיו לי, ומולדתך אשר הולדת אחריהם לך יהיו, על שם אחיהם יקראו בנחלתם, ואני בבואי מפדן מתה. עלי רחל בארץ כנען בדרך, בעוד כברת ארץ לבוא אפרתה, וקבריה שם בדרך אפרת היא בית לחם. וירא ישראל את בני יוסף ויאמר מאלה, ויאמר יוסף אל אביו, בניי הם אשר נתן לי אלוהים בזה, ויאמר קחם נא אלי ואברכם.
Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. So anybody who feels comfortable lifting the Torah? Mark, do you? Just bring your chair with you. It's a BYOC experience. And Diane, do you want to rap? You don't have to. Rebecca, you want to? Okay. Just like going around the room here. Vezot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. Eitz chaim hi lemachazikim ba v'tomachei hameushar. Eitz chaim hi lemachazikim ba tomachei hameushar. Deracheiha darchei noam v'chol netivoteh shalom. Deracheiha darchei noam v'chol netivoteh shalom. Yanai 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 yanai. Thank you. Yanai 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 Does anybody have a yard site this week who needs an El Mali or wants an El Mali? Okay. Well, then Alan will continue for us. The conclusion of the Torah service can be found on page 221. Oh, yeah. Do you want me to get it for you?
Yeah.
Oh, Akdamut. Oh, no, you're still in the right.
Yeah.
I thought you were in the
thought it was pretty
the wrong holiday. Yeah, exactly.
I just had it open. Okay. Ya hallelujah, Shem Adonai, ki nizgav shabo levado, zashamayim vayangen le'amod, ilvah v'tidav, Yisrael ha'bravo, hallelujah.
Hashivenu Adonai lecha, v'nashuva chadesh yamenu kekedem. Yitkadavi kadash be'aba, be'aba divaku tivam lichvachute b'chaychonu v'yomecho recherecho be'Yisrael, b'galav izman kavivimu, amen. Ish be'aba v'ach le'lam le'mel b'ya, yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitbar v'yitbar v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalashem v'yitagudishat v'yu le'elam v'gobechata v'shirata tushbata v'nachamata daman ba'alma v'imu, amen.
The whispered Amidah can be found on page 223. If you're not yet finished your Amidah, please continue at your own pace. Alan will begin for us the Amidah on page 223, and we'll come together for the Kaddish on page 225.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Eloheinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzhak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor HaNorah Eloyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim V'konei HaKol V'zocher Chastei Avod V'vi Goel Livnei V'nehem L'man Shmo Be'ava Melech Ozer V'kedem Moshiach Magen Baruch atah Adonai מגן ומפקד צבא, אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מלך רב להושיע, משיב הרוח מרגשם, מחלקל חיים וחסד, מחידים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים והופך חולים ומתיר אסורים, מקיים אותו לשני עפר, מרמוך בגב ורוד ומדור מלך, מלך ממינויים מצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות ביתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הביתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמעתי שמתו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלך כל הארץ כבודו, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, דברי קודשך כתוב לאמור. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור אדוני גודלך, לנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו, מפינוי מושל עולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. אתה אחד בשמך אחד, מכנס וגוי אחד בארץ, תפארת גדולה ועטרת ישועה, יום מנוחה קדושה לעמך נתת, אברהם יגר, יצחק ירנן, יעקב ובניו ינוחו בו, מנוחת אהבה ונדבה, מנוחת אמת ואמונה, מנוחת שלום ושלווה והשקט והבטח, מנוחה שלמה שאתה רוצה בה, יכירו בניך וידעו כי ביתך היא מנוחתם, ועל מנוחתם יקדישו את שמך. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, עצב מנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך, סבנו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, ותאר ליבנו לעבדך באמת, והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו בעבר ורצון שבת קודשך, ואנוכו וישמח מקדשי שמך, ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת. רצה אדוני אלוהינו, עמך שביעות תפילתם, והשבת אדוני בביתך, ותפילתם הבא תקבל ברצון, ותהי רצון תמיד ודע ישראל עמך, ותחזינה עינינו, בשובך לציון ברחמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, המחזיר שכינתו לציון, מודים אנחנו לך. הטוב כאילו חלו רחמך, ומחם כאילו תמה חסדך, מעולם קיווינו לך. ועל כל המפרח וממשיך מלכנו, תמיד לעולם ועד, וכל עם יודוך סלע, והללו את שמך באמת, העיר שבתנו ושבתנו סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולחנה להודות. שלום רב ישראל עמך, וכל יושבי תבל תשים לעולם, כי אתה מלך, אדון לכל השלום, וטוב בעיניך. לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת וכל שעה בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני, המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. צדקתך צדק לעולם, ותורתך אמת, וצדקתך אלוהים עד מרום, אשר עשי גדולות, אלוהים מי כמוך, צדקתך כהרי אל, משפטך תהום רבה, אדם ובהמה תושיע אדוני. יגדע ויגרש ואבא, בעומד יברכו תבמליך מלכותי בחייכון ובימיכון וחייכו בישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב עמו, אמן. יש רבה ברך לאלה ולא מעלמיים. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמר קודשה והוא לאל אמן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבתה ונגמתה רמן בעלמה ועמו, אמן. תתקבל צלותו וחונכו ישראל קדם ורושמיה ועמו, אמן. יהי שלום רב מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועמו, אמן. עושה שלום במעמיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועמו, אמן. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Page 232.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון וחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ועמו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו. לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Okay, I'm going to finish my sentence. Yasher koach to Alan and to Joel and to Eric. In just a moment, we'll go and get some food, and then we'll come back and do some learning. I'm so glad that my announcement made some of us feel more guilty than others in joining us today. But that means that I don't have enough sheets, but that's okay, you can share. It also means we have a little bit less food than we normally do. So just be conscious of the fact that there are lots of us here, which is amazing, and this should continue. But just be conscious of how much we're each taking to eat with others in the room. Yes, what is your question?
How come you need to say the whole prayer, תפילת עמידה מחדש, אחרי שכולנו עשינו את זה? אני לא מבינה, מה...
Because people can start to get, I mean, you can listen to the answer too, but the idea is that there's a repetition, which is that if someone didn't know how to say the whole Amidah themselves, then the leader says it out loud for them to be able to say the whole thing. Yeah, of course. Yes, yeah.
Rabbi Trinity made a big announcement about this last night.
Oh, she did? Oh, good. So did I this morning. So I'm glad we, oh, good. That's very nice. What?
For Mario to screw him?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone can leave now, yeah.
No, I'm saying that it doesn't always say.
Oh, you're already talking about that. Sorry, I moved on to a different topic. Right, it's not necessary. Because Musaf has become rabbinically necessary, but Mariv is never necessary. Mariv was always, the rabbis always assumed that Mariv was going to be done before went to bed. So it was just always, and it's the same Amidah that we do for Shachri. So I think they also kind of assumed that if it was going to be the same liturgy and you had done it in community earlier on the day, then you would do it by yourself later on. Yeah. That's a good one. No, it was the extra sacrifice. So it just wasn't seen. So we do what? Oh, yes, right. Because we don't have the sacrifices, so we do mitzvahs. Exactly. Yeah.
Good to get into the man, right? Name doesn't bother you. You're from back east?
I figured if I had something for Kiddush and then I had lunch, I already had 2,000.
Oh, there you go. Yes, 3 meals. Exactly. There you go. It's why I tell Rana not to put out so much food, because I think the early Mintamari, there just isn't, people aren't eating as much as if it was at like 7, because then they would be eating it as if it's dinner. But usually I expect 10 people, not 15, which is so nice.
It's so funny. I was looking at my watch, the clock
Yeah.
counts the whole time.
Yeah.
Then Eric and I, it's like, oh, I've got about 20 minutes. We had started on this. There was like this puzzle in the New Yorker that we were.
Oh, nice.
And it was really interesting. We were talking about it,
Uh-huh.
and then it's like, oh my God, it's 10 hours. I'm late now.
No worries.
You have.
We had a crew. Yeah. No, it's good. They only have caffeine? Oh. I might have other teas in my office if you want me to go check. I don't know what I have, but I could go check. No, I'm happy to. You want caffeine? No, I'll go check. I don't know that I have caffeinated, but if I do, I'll write it down. Right. How are you? How's everybody feeling? Better? Good? Yeah, no. Keep it on.
What's the most important thing about me?
An interesting meeting of the mind.
What's the weather in LA tomorrow? Sunny.
Years ago, friends of ours had friends. Oh, I'm sure. I don't know if you guys might see that. Diane, Churchill, Eric, Diane. Formal right, so friends of ours, actually, whose daughter will be married in Israel. But they, for years, had it. And they were like, because we went and we hung out with, I mean, restaurants and all of that, I've given up years of She's already learning tomorrow. She's been participating along on some of the things. So I definitely she knows Katon. Yeah, I heard Katon for sure.
Maryland is so much better, but okay, great. Okay, good. You're so welcome. Oh yeah. Stay up
to 3 o'clock in the morning, right? But tonight, but.
Oh, true. Yeah, I totally forgot. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, yeah, no problem. I was surprised that we had anything. It was just in the office.
There's no rose parade.
Oh, to here?
They don't do Sundays. They don't do, and here's why.
Got it.
Here's why. I know this.
Yeah.
Because
Kathy Rosenblatt supplied us with some really nice teas.
Minnie.
Yeah. But I think we're all done. Yeah.
That's a deal. They
Yeah,
have
exactly.
a deal with God. They won't have the parade on Sunday, which everyone needs to go to church. And God makes sure it doesn't parade on the Monday thereafter. That would otherwise cause a problem. That's what they do. They do not have it on Sunday for that very reason.
You can all eat more than you have. You listened way too well to what I said.
In the old days, we would bring all the rest on Sunday because they were all in church.
I'm sure it also would have been fun had I not said anything, but I was a little bit nervous that you guys mind sharing.
No, not at all.
Who knew? We had a stash upstairs.
Be very careful how you say that. It's being recorded.
A stash of caffeinated tea. I'm not so worried about being recorded. You are sharing if you don't mind. Okay, so I'm gonna get started. Those of you who have learned with me now since 2015 know that sometimes I go very deep into one topic or one verse or sometimes even one word with a bunch of different commentators. And sometimes I bring no commentators because I actually want us to focus just on what the text is offering to us. That's not to say that commentators didn't say anything about what we're about to talk about, but sometimes when we look at commentaries, it takes away from our own kind of creative experience of imagining what it is that we can do to connect this to the topic that I'm going to introduce. So I am not a big New Year's Eve person. I realize that it's tonight and it's very exciting, and tomorrow will be 2023 and that's also very exciting. Maybe, I don't even really know that I care, but but tomorrow will be the beginning of a new year and a new month. And it's just so interesting that tonight we also started the last book of Torah, such that next week, the first Shabbat of 2023, will be saying Chazak, Chazak, Venit Chazek. And that's the phrase that we say when we are finishing up really the end of anything, but most of us here when we're finishing up a book of Torah and moving on to the next book of Torah. And it's also kind of how we feel about finishing out a year, right? We've been seeing for months, I feel like it starts earlier and earlier every year now, but we've been seeing for months, Spotify puts out all the songs that you listened to. And if you're on social media platforms, they show you the people who you've spoken to most or the pictures that you looked at most, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody wants us to recall the year before, which we do for Rosh Hashanah in terms of our actions, and then think forward to the next year, which in our case, this year is 2023. So what I did was, instead of focusing in on a particular verse or comment or even subject, I wanted us to look at different sections, I guess you could call them. I made them into sections, but different pieces of this week's Parsha that reflect the feelings that we might have going into a new year, that we might think of at the end of one year and going into the next year. So the Parashat Vayechi is, as I said before, is the last parsha of the book of Breshit, and it is not only the part everyone always says, oh, it's the parsha where Joseph dies. Yeah, it's the parsha where Joseph dies. It's also the parsha where Jacob dies, which is really interesting. They both die in the same parsha, not at the same time, but not so far away from one another, like maybe a chapter or two from one another. Jacob dies first, and then Joseph later on. And Jacob's death, as we'll see in just a moment, is a really big deal because of Joseph's reaction to it. And Joseph's death is less of a big deal, but is the end of our book of Breshit. And as Bob Braun mentioned earlier today in his drash, the book of Breshit really is mostly about Joseph. I mean, when we talk ratio of characters, he takes up the most parshiot of any other character that we have in Breshit. So we're going to look through these different, again, I made them into sections. We're going to skip around a little bit, starting at the beginning of Parshat Vayechi. And then we're going to look just ever so briefly into Parshat Shmot to see how, not only how the metaphorical year ends, but the next one also begins. Does everybody kind of get the framing for what we're doing here? Okay, great. So each one of these passages, I'm interested in knowing from you, how does this reflect, or how does this mirror, or how does this connote, if you want to think about it that way, the end of a year going into the next, or the end of something going into the next of something. Okay, so Breshit 48, chapter 48, verse 8 through 11. If those of you on Zoom have the sheet, wonderful, and if not, I'll just tell you what the verses are. Okay. So these verses start off by saying, Vayar Yisrael b'nei Yosef vayomer mi elah. And Jacob sees Joseph's sons, and he says, who are these guys? Right? He doesn't know them because Joseph has had this whole basically parallel life that Jacob has had nothing to do with. And so when Jacob first sees Joseph's sons for the first time, Jacob says, who are they? And Joseph said to his father, they are my sons, whom God has given me here. Bring them up to me, he said, Jacob says, that I may bless them. Now, Israel's eyes were dim with age. He could not see. So Joseph brought them close to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see you again, and here God has let me see your children as well. So first of all, what does this remind us of? What does this moment remind us of? Yitzchak. It's like almost verbatim what happens when Yitzchak is giving Esav and Jacob their blessings, right? His eyes are dim. He doesn't know who they are. He asks who they are. They have to, in that case, Rebecca, but in this case, Joseph has to say who the people are in front of him. And then the father figure, in this case, Jacob, says, let me bless them. He's doing exactly what his father did for him, and it's being played out here again for him, for his grandkids. Okay, what is this general little narrative here make you think of in terms of the end of something, or the end of a year going into another year, the reflection piece? Yeah, Alan.
It's a generational component. I mean, he's at the end of his life, and now he's looking at grandchildren.
Great.
He never expected to see.
Great. And I think AJ just said Lador Vador, right? This idea that we are moving. He knows that he is no longer going to be alive, at least for much longer, and recognizes that you need to pass those things on to the next generation. And in his mind and in his family's mind, we know that comes in the form of blessing. So when we're thinking about, again, the way in which we've been kind of societally told to think about a year in review, the idea of thinking back and thinking forward, right? What has come before me that I should now bestow on those who are going to come ahead of me and be my future. Anything else people are noticing in this narrative? Yeah, Rebecca. Yeah. Interesting. Great. So it's possible it's possible that there's some meaning in terms of the skipping of a generation. What we didn't see, I just didn't bring it for today, is that there is this whole passage. It might actually be an entire parak of Joseph giving his children what he calls blessings. If you really read into them, I'm not sure if they're all such blessings, but he at least tells them who they're going to be when they grow up. And so he doesn't skip a generation completely, but in this moment, the blessing that he's giving is skipping that generation, going to the grandchildren instead of to the children, which is fascinating and still shows that really forward thinking, right? Like he's dealt with his kids. Now he's really trying to do that for his grandkids. Yes, I know. Sure, sure. Mm. Yeah, beautiful. I Beautiful. I think that has totally to do with the framework. This idea of gratitude, no matter what you've been through or what you've experienced. And in terms of Joseph and Jacob, it's been very tumultuous, that you still come to this place of gratitude when you know that you're on the precipice of something else, right? So when we think about a whole year, the whole year might not have been great, right? For a lot of people in this room, there were many difficult moments this past year that you're ready to not necessarily leave behind in a forgetful way, but be able to not have them in the coming year. And so to be able to say, I'm still grateful for the year that I had, even if it had its challenges, or even in their case, if we had our challenges. Yeah, fine. Yeah. Yeah, right, right. Right, that there's this fix, this tikkun between Joseph and Jacob, and I would even venture to say with Joseph's kids, right? Because Jacob doesn't really know them because he was so out of his life, and maybe even Joseph's brothers, right? They're not in this particular picture here, but the tikkun could very much be between Joseph and his brothers. The fact that Jacob is able to even give this blessing, that they were able to all come together in this past week's parsha. Yeah.
Because nobody corrected Yitzchak's hand when he reached out to bless the wrong side. You're gonna say, purposely. It's as if he knows the family history and doesn't want it to.
Right, right. Adrian, what are you gonna say? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, so that goes back to Rebecca's statement before, right, of the skipping of the generation of, is there a reason that we don't hear about the kids before we hear about the grandkids? If you look in the parsha right before this, there is a list of, Reuven, you are going to be like the blah 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 and the blah blah blah, and Levi, it goes through all of them. And I want to say blah 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 because I don't have a chumash in front of me, but if I had it in front of me, I could tell you exactly what it says. But they're not particularly, they're not blessings. They're in the form of blessing. My guess, there is a lot in the Gemara actually about Joseph's sons. Surprisingly, nothing I can quote offhand, but because they were such unknown and yet important characters, there is quite a bit that our rabbis speak about in the Gemara. I don't think that. I think it's a big deal, and I think it probably doesn't matter at all. Like I think that Jacob probably gave to his kids what we consider to be blessings in the form of, I know you really well. I can see that this is where you're headed for your future. He didn't really know his grandkids. So I think when he went to actually say something to them for their future, it came into the form of blessing because it was, this is what I hope for you, right? It wasn't, oh, I know you and therefore you're going to be a such and such person. Yeah. Bless you. Oh, totally. Right. So we're gonna get to that passage right now. So hold that question, and then let's get there. So so AJ's talking about this passage that comes next. It's about 7 verses later, chapter 48, verse 17. Vayar Yosef. Sorry, I have to hold it close to my face. Vayar Yosef ki yashit aviv yad yamino al rosh Ephraim vayera be'enav vayitmoch yad aviv lehasir oto me'al rosh Ephraim al rosh Menashe. So when Joseph saw that his father was putting his right hand on Ephraim's head, he thought that he was making a mistake, right? So he takes his father's hand and he goes to make it right, so to speak. Now, interesting, if you think back to the Jacob story, you know, he should know better. He should know better than to move his hands, because Jacob, who's the one giving the blessings, did exactly that, right? I mean, he wasn't the one with the hands, he was the one getting the blessing, but still this idea of the hands being important as to where they're placed, Joseph should have known that. But okay, let's keep going. Vayomer Yosef elevav lo chen avi. So Joseph says to his father, it's not so. Don't do it this way. Ki ze habechor sim yamincha al rosho. Because the other kid, you're supposed to put your right hand on his head, right? You have that right hand on the younger child, not the older child who's supposed to receive it. But his father objected, saying, I know, my son, I know. He too shall become a people, and he too shall be great. Yet his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall be plentiful enough for nations. So to go back to AJ's question, did he have some divine providence that his hands needed to be switched such that the younger of the two got the quote better of the blessing? Sure. It could also be the case that he saw something in him that made him look like he was going to be stronger and more able. I have really no idea.
But wait, he's actually
Yeah.
seeing them
Yeah.
for the first time before he gives the blessing.
Right. Well, that's why AJ had the question. Yeah.
No, yes, but it's going to what he was seeing something in them. That would be a stretch. That would be a stretch when you've seen someone for the first time. My gut instinct is, well, you're not worthy of the blessing.
Well, sort of, except for if you think about it in the opposite. If you think about how we judge people negatively, we do that very quickly, right? So it's possible, right? If you see someone, I don't mean negative in terms of their character. I mean, if you see someone walking down the street and they seem disheveled, right? And you might move a little bit more out of the way so that you won't encounter them because you might be concerned as to what that encounter might be. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that's generally the human thing that we do. So it's possible that Jacob just had a really natural way of not only reading a person based on those kinds of features, but maybe he really did see something in these kids that he could tell based off of how they were playing with each other or how they were I mean, I'm completely droshing. None of this is written anywhere, but it's possible that he just could tell based on their attitude in the world that one was better than the other, or it could be divine, right? Or it could have been that he had some connection with God telling him, no, this child is going to be greater than the other. So I'm going to, or maybe those two things are the same. Beautiful. Yeah. Right. Or did you have your hand up?
Yeah, when I first read it, and as we're talking, I realized that these are the founders of the Jewish people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not just like, hey, wish you doing well in your life, you know? I have a feeling that, this is a subtext of a lot more profound, and they're about to enter slavery, which I guess he knew about, right? And so things are, you know, he's kind of giving them, the last will and testament of nationhood.
Right. Well, and to go back to the original framing, right? That if we know that these are going to be the people who create nations for our people, not to be redundant, that it's important that when we think about a chapter closing and another chapter opening, which in our own Torah is the end of one book and the beginning of another, it's important to know who those people are going to be that are going to be able to be strong and lead us in masterful ways, rather than just be like the nice guy, right? That Jacob really needed to think about who those people were going to be. I just don't have a good answer as to how he knew which hand was to go where, and I'm sure there are commentaries on it, but Rebecca Schatz doesn't have an answer for you. Were you going to say something, Joel?
I was just going to say, according to Rashi, Jacob did have a relationship with Ephraim, and he studied Talmud with him.
Oh, before this? Oh, really? Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that little moment was.
Studied Talmud with it, right after he took off his tribal.
Yeah. Oh, I see. I was like, what? There's something that I'm not catching on to. What Joel just said was that according to the rabbis, there's this Rashi, there's this understanding that Jacob, I don't know, I keep doing that. Jacob had a relationship with Ephraim, that they used to study Talmud together. Now, the joke in that is that the Talmud didn't exist when they existed. I did not catch on to that as quickly as everybody else in the room did, but yeah, I think, but that's right. That's where the Talmud comes in, that the rabbi or Rashi come in, where the rabbis are trying to make an understand. That's why I didn't want to bring commentaries, because I wanted us to be able to think kind of beyond, like, what are the answers that they're giving, which that makes no sense. It's lovely, but it makes no sense, right? So why was it, right? This question that AJ is asking, that we can only think about beautiful answers to. How could it be that Jacob knew to switch his arms? Yeah, Rebecca.
I just wanted to say, going back to the twin thing.
Yeah.
Is that it seems like this is shedding a different light on what happened between Isaac, Rebecca, and Jacob.
Oh, interesting.
Because in some ways it's saying you couldn't have tricked. What he's saying is you can't trick. You know, I know what I'm doing. I know how to receive them, and I don't really know them. And so you can take that back to Isaac's story and say it
was intentional.
It's not like if Rebecca were not there to do the dance, you know.
Yeah.
The heads that, you know, history was.
Right. That's interesting that maybe this, in terms of that idea of tikkun, that this is actually showing us that wasn't, quote, wrong or done in a haphazard way. It was really done with intention and a knowing that those two people had to receive different blessings based on who they were going to be for us, that there was no malintent in terms of how Rebecca or Isaac went about it, but that was actually what was intended for the two of them. That's very interesting. When I read this passage, the thing that I thought about immediately in terms of the end of a year is that sometimes we have to think about things with a different framework to be able to be okay with them when we move on, right? That sometimes we look back at our year and something that was either very challenging or a mistake we made, or bless you, something that happened that in the moment felt like we were never going to get out of it. I'm not talking about, you know, tragedy or anything, anything really terrible, but maybe we, I can't think of a good example right now, but like a mistake we made or something that was hard for us to get over. That sometimes when we're thinking back, when we're recalling a year, we have to give ourselves a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and wonder if that wasn't a lesson that we needed to learn, right? That wasn't something that was kind of done with it. It was really terrible in the moment. It was a bad challenge, but then we were able to get through it to be better people, hopefully, right? That there's a way of kind of looking at things from the other side to be able to reflect in such a way that anything that had happened was for me to experience so that I could move through it. Again, I would never say that to someone who's in grief or someone who went through a terrible tragedy. I don't think that those things align. But I'll tell you a funny story. This didn't happen this year. When I was working in Northern California, but I was still running Kol Tefillah for Betham, I had talked to everybody here, so Rabbi Kligfeld and Cantor Shorney, and we had gone through all the dates that we were going to have this next conference, and it was going to be the conference that I ended up actually, I had been hired by the time that conference happened, but it was going on during the preparation for it was going on during my interview, and so everything was like a little bit more complicated, and I was looking at dates everywhere, every calendar, because I didn't work here, so I had to look at my calendar. Anyway, long story short, we sent out this huge email to everybody that we knew, everybody who had ever been to a Kol Tefillah conference, sending out the date. It was going to be February 21st, 2020. And we sent it out, and it was so great. And about, I don't know, 3 days later, I decided, well, maybe I should put in my own calendar so that I remember it for the next year. Lo and behold, it was my cousin's wedding, and I was officiating. And I hadn't put it on my calendar for the same reason I hadn't put Kol Tefillah on my calendar yet, because I just figured I would remember. And so I was mortified, and I had to send out this terrible email that apologized and said we would find another date, et cetera, et cetera. And I was mortified. It was a terrible experience. It didn't cause anybody any harm, thank goodness, but it makes me write emails differently now, right? When I know that something's going out to a large group of people, I write them very differently and check lots of places. So that's a very small, not really consequential example to this, but the way in which we think about things we've done and then reflect on them sometimes allows us to have a better perspective on them moving forward. Okay, this next one is pretty obvious, but Genesis 49, verse 1, it says, Vayikra Yaakov el banav. So Jacob called to his sons, Vayomer heasfu va'agida lachem et asher yikra etchem be'acharit hayamim. So I'm going to tell you what's going to happen after my days are over. At the end of my days is what it says. Vayachal Yaakov letzavot et banav, vayesof raglav al mita, vayigva veyeasef el amav. So Jacob finished telling his sons what he had to tell them, and he drew his feet into the bed, and he breathed his last breath, and then he was gathered to his kin. Now, just very interestingly, vayeasef is the same word that Yosef stems from, so it is an interesting use of words for his last moments. Vayipol Yosef al pnei aviv, vayevk elav, vayishak lo. So Joseph falls on the face of his father, and he cries literally upon him, and he kisses him. So I'm just going to speak to this one, then we're going to go to the next one, because I'm just looking at the time here. But it's obvious that when we go through a year, it means that there are people we've lost. Whether there are people that we've lost that we were close to, or people in our community that we've lost that we heard about and saw the repercussions of it in our community, or people just in the world that we know have been lost, whether due to tragedy or due to the way in which we care for people in this world. And that is always something that we think back on. And when you think back on a year, you undoubtedly think back on the wonderful things and also the things that were quite hurtful and that brought us grief. So I thought that this was particularly poignant because it definitely is a part of, it's the reason that we have Yizkor at Yom Kippur, right? The way that we start off our Jewish New Year is to remember those who have allowed us to come into this year and be in this year, but who we are missing going into the next one. The one piece of this that I wanted to point out that I think is quite poignant is that Jacob gathers his sons to him, which we've now talked about quite a bit, and that's when he goes, right? That there is something, we've had, I think, 6 deaths in this past week. There is something about time of year where you see a certain I don't know what the exact word is, but like it has a certain reputation for being a time where people pass away. I'm sure, Chaim, you see this quite a bit. Yeah, so I think that there's something to just realizing that in a moment where people are recalling a year with people, that this is also potentially a time of year that right on the precipice of a new year, people are wondering what a new year is going to be like without those people around.
Hang on to the point where they can see their family.
Correct. Yeah, if they can, yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And I personally have never felt a need to go out and celebrate on New Year's because I'm so grateful to live long enough to see another year. That's its own reward. I never felt that I had to
Sure.
drink champagne, toot a horn, wear a face. I never felt I had to do that.
Yeah, I think we all celebrate and all commemorate and all reflect in different ways, right? I think that is really, it's an important thing to do. I think being Jewish, we're lucky that we kind of have it twice in our calendar, that we do it really deeply and intensely at the beginning of our year in September, October-ish time for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And then in the secular year, we get to do it again now. And so some people feel more connected to when your calendar shifts from 2022 to 2023 and others from 5782 to 5783. So but yes, I think you're right that we all are dealing with that celebration and that commemoration differently. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, that's great. That's a great outlook. So yeah, Sandra. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. That not only is he to the people who he's closest to, but also those who came before him. Yeah. So this next piece is might take a little bit of a stretch, but I'll be very impressed if someone can connect it. It's actually, this next piece is what made me think of doing this teaching this way. But so it says here, Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all of the officials of Pharaoh, the senior members of his court, and all of Egypt's dignitaries. Together with all of Joseph's household, his brother and his father's household, only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the region of Goshen. Any thoughts as to how that's connecting? Yeah, AJ. In contrast with Pesach, in which way? Mm. Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah, maybe. Right. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really fascinating. You should remember that for when we read that part of Shmo, 'cause that's a fascinating parallel. I do think that
Rabbi, would you repeat for Zoom?
Yes, I can try. Yeah, so AJ was pointing out that this seems to be kind of a parallel or mirror to what we then experience in reading about the Egyptians during the Passover story and the way in which they deal with their flocks and their stuff and their families, which is almost opposite to how we're now seeing these Egyptians gather together with the family to go up to bury their father. Yes. Do you want to just say it? It might be easier.
Contrast? Should I take this off? So the contrast between the way the Egyptians and the dignitaries go up with with Joseph, the bones of Jacob and his offspring,
Right.
as opposed to at Passover where they're not going along and then they have to follow writing down on the Hebrews. However, it occurred to me there's a little bit of a parallel there between when Jacob returns from
With the chariots.
When Jacob comes back home
Oh.
after serving Laban and he's
Yeah,
got
yeah. Sorry,
all
sorry.
of
I was
his-
thinking Joseph.
and
yeah.
he's got a whole bunch of flocks and he's got wives and kids and all of this, and he separates them. So he's doing something separate there too. It's a little bit of another contrast.
Interesting. Sandra, you can just leave it.
So what I'm seeing here is the bookends
Yeah.
to Joseph's story. First of all, I'm seeing Kaved
Yeah.
right? But I'm also seeing the bookends of Joseph's story in that, because how did Joseph come down to Egypt?
Yeah. Oh,
By
interesting.
being sold into slavery.
Yeah.
And now he's bringing his father back.
Great.
With the dignitaries, with the kavod, with
Yeah.
him being a big person. And so I'm
Yeah.
seeing the contrast between how he got to Egypt and how he's taking his father out of Egypt.
Beautiful. So Sandra mentioned that this seems to be like a bookend of Joseph's story, where he was brought down to be in this Egyptian court, so to speak, in a very different way than he ends up leaving with them as comrades, right? They end up being his family and his community on the way out to be able to comfort him for his father. And that is what I was thinking about when I was connecting this to the end of a year. You never know when you begin a year who you're going to meet and who's going to influence the rest of that year, and who would end up by your side, or who would end up supporting you in a time of need, or even just in a mundane time. We have no idea starting tomorrow. By the way, you could say this about, March 2nd also, but let's go with January 1st, 2023. You have no idea when starting a year who before the next year is going to end up impacting your life, and who would end up being these dignitaries, important or not, but the people who would gather with you to be in moments where you would need them most. And that to me is, I think, one of the most important reflections is, at this time last year, did I know that so-and-so was going to be such a close friend? Or did I know that I was going to end up being so close to so-and-so because I walked through a grieving moment with their family? Or did I know, right? You never know. You never know who you're going to influence. And we definitely never know at the beginning of a year how many people that will impact in those 365 days. So the last one, I'm going to skip over the middle one here and then go to the last piece, which is actually the beginning of Parshat Shmot. And the reason I want to do that is because we say chazak, v'nit chazek in the middle, right? We say it at the end in the middle of this source sheet. Sorry, that was not clear. At the end of the book of Breshit and before the book of Shmot, of Exodus. And so what we see here is that Jacob died. We just read that. The passage I'm skipping over is that Joseph died. And Then we get to the beginning of, you literally turn the page in our Chumash, right? There's a Haftorah in between, but then you turn the page in our Chumash, you get to the book of Exodus, and it says, Ve'ele shmot b'nei Yisrael habaim Mitzrayma. And these are the names of the children of Israel, so the children of Jacob, who came towards Mitzrayim. Et Yaakov ish uveto va'u. So of Yaakov, ish uveto is, you could either see that as man and his wife, they came, or let's just think of it as households. Their whole household came. And then it says a few verses later, because they just listed the names, so I didn't list the names for all of us here. Vayakom melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada et Yosef. And a new king came into power in Egypt, and he did not know Joseph. And this is how our story of slavery begins. Right? So I think I'm definitely not trying to end on a sour note, but more maybe a realistic note, that we spend December 31st, some of us, not all of us, present company included, we spend December 31st celebrating and reminiscing and focusing on the way that the year was, and some people will make New Year's resolutions and want for this coming year to be beautiful and better, et cetera, et cetera. And we don't always think about the ways in which we're going to have people remember us, or things that we've done remembered, or make sure that that which should be changed or that which should not be repeated is not done in the coming year. Right? We do that a lot for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur because it's all about behavior. We don't do that so much in the secular New Year. And so I wanted to remind us that at the end of this book that is beautiful and glowing and all about family being able to come back together, and it's really just the perfect kind of Disney fairy tale at the end of Genesis, that Shmot begins with reminding us that that really isn't reality. That as soon as that fairy tale was out of the picture, then all of a sudden we had real hardships. I hope that this coming year does not bring that for us. And I hope that December 31st does not turn into January 1st and have us not remembering who we were and what we've done and all of that. But I do hope that we keep in mind the things that we've done really well, and that we continue to do those things and we move them forward into the coming year. And also think of the ways that we've missed the mark, because we're really good at that on Rosh Hashanah and not necessarily as good for the secular New Year. And the ways that we can make that better in the coming year, because had this king potentially known of Joseph, or had his legacy been brought down for the generations, for the king to have known who he was and what he did for not only his own people, but also for the people of Egypt, potentially we would have had a very different story for the book of Exodus. Shabbat Shalom. No, Jacob was never buried in Egypt. Joseph's bones were carried out. Yeah, Jacob was always buried in Marat Machpelah. He's still there. I mean, his tomb is still there. Yeah. No, he was brought to Marat Machpelah. I just didn't include that in here. We're going to conclude this with Birkat. Can someone just start the Zimun who ate? Did people eat bagels? Does someone eat a bagel? Okay. Alan ate half a bagel. Everybody should know. Okay, so Birkat Hamazon, you have benchers in front of you. I believe it's on page 47. We'll do the first paragraph together, the rest of it silently, and then we will go straight into Mariv. Fikim b'negev hazorim b'limas berina yitoru
Elohim Kan, Kol Besudim Kan, Nevarech Eloheinu Shalchanu Mishalom. Baruch Eloheinu Shalchanu Mishalom, Tivah Hayinu, Baruch Baruch Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hazan et haolam kulo b'teshuvah, v'chein v'chesed u'rachamim. Munaseh lechem v'chol basar, ki le'olam chasto, u'teshuvah gadol. Amin v'chasol lanu v'hayasol lanu, mazon le'olam va'ed ba'avur Shem. Ki hozanim fanes la'kol, u'meitiv la'kol, u'mechin mazon chol briatav Hashem bara baruch atah Adonai hazan et hakol. Amen. Lehem ha'yitin Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom. Shakoch, Alan. Do you also want to leave? No, I'm just kidding. We're we're going to continue with Mariv on page 2 at 64 in the Lev Shalem. Please rise. והוא רחום יכפר עליו ולא ישחית וירבה לשיבה בבלר כל חמתו אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קוראנו ברכו את אדוני המבורך ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד ומעביר יום ומביא לילה ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב הרבים אהבת עולם בית ישראל אברכה ואהבתך תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד.
Adonai Elohim emet ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה בני ישראל לכהנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך בעלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נוראתי לא תוסף אלה מלכותך רובנך בוקר יום לפני משה זה אלי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כיפת אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל השכיבנו אדוני עלינו שלום ואמנו בחינוך ועשינו ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ושלום יטווה עד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד ברוך אדוני לעולם אמן ואמן ברוך אדוני ושן שכן שלום הללויה ברוך אדוני כי המלכות שלך היא עולם לעד תמלך בכבוד כי לנו מלך אלה אתה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלך עלינו לעולם ועד ועל כל מעשיו יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבם והמעד יברח ירתה וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ויום מכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבם מברך לעולם לעמי עמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן ועלמה ואמרו amen. The Whispered Amidah can be found on page 270. If you've not yet finished your own Amidah, please continue at your own pace. Chatzikash on page 279. יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה, בהמה דברכותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וימכון וחיי לכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה ברוך לעולם לעמי עמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלש וקדושה בריחו, לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בהמה ואמרו אמן. ויהי נועם ה' אלוהינו עלינו מעשה ידינו כוננו עלינו מעשה ידינו כוננו ישב וסדר ימצא שדי כלוננו. יקראן היבני אנוכי בצרה חצבך בדרכי ממסביהו וארי בשועתי אורכי ממסביהו וארי בשועתי. Page 216. ואתה קדוש השבתי לתישראל וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך כל הארץ כבודו. מקבלים דמיין ותישאני רוח ושמע אחרי קורש גדול ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ויבטחו וכידע שמך כי לא עזבת דרכך אדוני, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה וידיר. Page 280. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בהמה דברכותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וימכון וחיי לכל בית ישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה ברוך לעולם לעמי עמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלש וקדושה בריחו, לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בהמה ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צוד ההון ובתהון לכל ישראל קודם ההון דוד שמעיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום ארון שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום מרמיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עלינו לשבח לאדוני כל אדוני צבא שלנו. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Mourner's Kaddish, page 282. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דיברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם לעמי עמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה בחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. You're all very ready. Yeah. Ya nai na nai 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 ya nai na nai nai ya nai ya nai na nai 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 ya nai na nai nai ya nai 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 ya na nai ya na nai 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 ya na nai ya na nai nai ya na nai ya na nai ya na nai 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 Ya na na ya na 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 Hina el Yeshuati Eftach velo efchad Ki ozi vezimrat ya Adonai vayehi li shua Ushavtem mayim v'sason Mimanei ha-Yeshua L'Adonai ha-Yeshua Alamcha v'irchatecha sela Adonai tzevaot Imanu Miskavlanu Elohei Yaakov Sela Adonai Tzevaot Asher Yadam Boteach Bach Adonai Hoshia Hamelech Ya'anenu V'yom Korenu La Yehudim Hayta ora Vesimcha vesason veikar kenti elanu kosi Yeshuotesa uveshem Adonai ekra yaina na yana na na yaina na yana na Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei vesamim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael le'amim ben yom hashvihi le'sheshet yamei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol hamavdil ben kodesh lechol chatoteinu imcho zarenu v'chasbenu yarbe yarbe kachom כוכבים בלילה, זרנו וחסמנו, ירבה ירבה כחו, וכך כוכבים בלילה. שבוע טוב, 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 אליהו הנביא, אליהו התשבי, אליהו הגלעדי במהרה בימינו יבוא אלינו עם משיח בן דוד, עם משיח בן דוד. Shavua Tov, Happy New Year. See you all in 2023. Just a reminder that this happens every week, and it would be lovely to have you all every week. And also that next Shabbat morning, Beitenu has been back for a while, but outside, Beitenu will be returning to Hillel. So we'll be in this room at 9:45 on Shabbat morning, and we would love to, I actually won't be in the room, I'll be doing the bat mitzvah, but Rabbi Kligfeld will love to see you at Beitenu at 9:45. See y'all later. Bli neder, yes, indeed.
What's better? Lena. I would have to look that up. I don't know.